Why New Zealanders don't live in 80% of their own country's area. What is the thing that they are scared of? Why can't they grow their crops on their own land to feed their kids and themselves? Why don't they build buildings in 80% of their country's area? If they don't use 80% of their land, then what is their biggest source of income to run the country? And where do New Zealanders come from? Well, these are some of the most important questions that we are going to discuss today. So, let's start the video. New Zealand is a beautiful place that sits in the southern part of the Pacific Ocean, far away from Australia, about 4,000 kilometers. It's known as one of the most peaceful countries globally. People from places like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and many other countries often connect with each other with cricket. When they think of cricket, names like Brendan McCullum, Kane Williamson, and Trent Bolt often come to their minds. Apart from cricket, New Zealand is renowned worldwide for its stunning mountains, beautiful lakes, and delicious high quality meat. These natural wonders make it a unique and sought after destination for travelers from all over the globe. You might have seen it in those big movies from Hollywood like Lord of the Rings, which was filmed in New Zealand, this really special place. Lord of the Rings, by the way, was a great movie. I loved it, and my special and favorite character was Gollum. Do you know him? Well, back to the video. The weather here is a lot like what you'd find in the UK, in New Zealand, okay? It's not too hard with winters that last a long time and plenty of rain, but even though it's such a nice place to live, there aren't many people here. In fact, the population of New Zealand is less than 7% of the UK's. If you take a look at a map of New Zealand, you'll notice that most of the land is wide open without many people living there. Most people in New Zealand, around 70%, live somewhere in the northern part of the country. And out of all the folks living in the north, half of them call Auckland home. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? With its beautiful environment and low crime rates, why don't more people choose to live in New Zealand? There is something to ponder over why a whopping 80% of this country's land remains unoccupied. First, when you check a map, you'll notice that New Zealand is quite a long way from most other places on Earth. Picture this: if you take off from Kolkata or Mumbai in India, for an example, and hop on a plane, you will be flying for a whopping 18 to 22 hours over the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean before you finally land in New Zealand. Now you might be wondering, how did folks even manage to get to such a faraway island in first place? Well, there are actually quite a few reasons behind it. When we check out certain websites about New Zealand, we can learn that it was found by a bunch of Maori folks, sometimes between 1320 and 1350. These Maori people came from other nearby islands, which were known as the Polynesian Islands back then. They hopped onto a boat and sailed over to New Zealand around the 13th century. During this time, rulers like Bengal and Genghis Khan were big shots in Eurasia, which is a huge chunk of land that includes places like Europe and Asia. Now let's explore why they decided to leave their old island and move to this new country. As we dug into this question, we found some interesting information from a report by the BBC. It turns out the story of how the Maori people came to New Zealand is a bit different from what we thought. Instead of New Zealand being discovered in the 1300s, it was actually discovered much earlier, around 750 AD, by a man named Kupe. Kupe was just a regular fisherman working hard to provide for his family. However, he started noticing a problem. Whenever they caught a big fish in their nets, a large octopus in the area would swoop in and eat it. This left them with very little food to sustain themselves, since fish was their main source of nourishment at that time. So the scarcity of fish became a major issue for them. And this reminds me of the movie Moana. I don't know why, but it's a little bit the same as the story of Moana, don't you think? So, back to the video. Because of this problem, Kupe and his friends decide to go on a journey by sea to search for another lighthouse. On this journey, Kupe travels with about 20 to 25 friends. After sailing for a while, they see big mountains, which means they are close to the island known as New Zealand. This island has lots of fish, animals, and fruits from the sea, as you know, but there aren't any other towns or villages here. It's a good spot for Kupe and his group, so he tells the other in his group to go back to the Polynesian islands, and they brought everyone on this new place. Over time, the Maori people started living in this land. They were peaceful and didn't have any worries because they were far from other places where there might be danger or enemies, but things were about to get different. In the 17th century, Western countries were eager to become more powerful. They sent explorers to find new lands and take control of them, all to make their own countries stronger. Back in the day, a guy named Abel Tasman from the Netherlands decided to check out the bottom part of the Pacific Ocean. People back then thought there had to be some big land down there. So Tasman sailed and found New Zealand in 1642. When they got there, they got into a big fight with the Maori folks and they had to run away to save themselves. In 1769, a man named James Cook, who was a soldier, came to New Zealand. When he arrived, there was a big fight again between his group and the Maori people who lived there. Many important Maori leaders died in this fight, but James Cook couldn't take control of New Zealand. He tried again later, but this time he made a careful map of all his travels to New Zealand. This map helped other Europeans come to New Zealand in the 1700s. Later, Europeans made a clever agreement with the Maori people. They were really greedy and just wanted to make money. So they built a harbor in New Zealand. About 100 years later, and the British took over New Zealand completely. In 1840, the British and Maori people made a deal called a treaty. This treaty said that New Zealand would belong to the British and European Empire. Well, back then there were around 200,000 Maori people, but after 100 years, their population didn't grow. Instead, it dropped to 40,000. The reason for this drop was that many Maori people got sick and died because of diseases brought by the English from Europe. Their bodies weren't ready to fight these new diseases because they hadn't been exposed to them before. In the end, the British figured out that if they wanted to stay in New Zealand, they had to keep up with the people who were already there. Otherwise, they wouldn't make any progress. Now, that's a bit of history about the people of New Zealand. Let's move on to our next question. Why don't New Zealanders live in 80% of their country's area? New Zealand is really a beautiful place, but living there isn't easy because of its unique geography. Instead of wide, flat lands like in other places, New Zealand has lots of big, rocky mountains. These mountains make it hard to build big things like roads. Imagine trying to put a highway through a mountain range. It's tough, right? Because of all these big mountains, there are fewer places where people can live comfortably. The middle parts of the country where the mountains are don't have many people, but the flatter areas, especially in the lower part of the North Island, are great for living. That's why big cities like Auckland and Wellington are there. It gets even trickier because the eastern side of the mountains doesn't get much rain. Most of the rain falls on the western slopes, so the eastern areas are dry. That makes it tough to grow crops and makes it less nice for living there. So, even though New Zealand is stunning, where people live is mostly decided by the land. The mountains, lack of flat land, and different rainfall patterns mean people mostly live in certain places. Mountain areas are amazing, but not many people live there because it's harder to live. New Zealanders are hesitant to live in 80% of their country's land due to the challenging terrain, including rugged mountains and unstable terrain, which can pose risks such as landslides and limited access to essential services like roads and infrastructure. This makes it difficult to establish sustainable communities and maintain a high quality of life in those areas. As for growing crops, the geographical features of New Zealand, such as the dryness on the eastern side of the mountains and the uneven distribution of rainfall, make it challenging to sustain agriculture in certain regions. Limited access to water and less fertile soil contribute to this difficulty, making it harder for New Zealanders to grow enough food to support themselves and their families. Regarding building construction, the rugged landscape and limited flat land in 80% of the country's area present obstacles for infrastructure development. Steep slopes and unstable terrain make it challenging and costly to build stable structures, such as homes and commercial buildings, which discourages extensive urban development in these regions. Additionally, factors like the cost of construction materials and the need for specialized engineering further deter building projects in these areas. So that's how they live. Now you might be thinking about how these guys make money and manage themselves. Like, what is their source of income to run the country? New Zealand's income comes from two main sources: exports from their primary sector, agriculture, forestry, and fishing, and their service sector. Traditionally, agriculture has been the backbone of New Zealand's economy. They are particularly famous for their dairy products like milk and cheese, which make up a whopping 28% of their total exports. Meat, fruits, vegetables, and even wine are also important agricultural exports. These resources are plentiful thanks to New Zealand's abundant farmland and natural resources. However, the service sector has grown significantly in recent years and now contributes a larger portion to the GDP, around 63% in 2013. This sector includes a wide range of industries such as tourism, education, finance, and healthcare. Tourism is a major player, bringing in revenue from visitors from all over the world who come to experience New Zealand's stunning scenery and outdoor activities. Education has also become a significant source of income, with a growing number of international students coming to study in New Zealand's universities. So, while agriculture remains a crucial part of New Zealand's economic identity, the service sector is now the leading source of income for the country. This diversification helps to make New Zealand's economy more stable and resilient. Alright, this concludes the video. If you believe this video has added value to your life, hitting that subscribe button and liking the video will indicate to me that you have indeed learned or discovered something today. Also, please leave some comments sharing your thoughts on the topic or anything you'd like to say to me. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. Goodbye, and I'll see you next time.